Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Established Run's NBA Injury Report Analysis Show. I'm Drew Dinkmeyer, here with Mike Gallagher. Mike, we've got 13 games, just a monster slate to get through. Actually, not as bad of an injury report as you might normally get for a slate this size, but still, like, no time to waste on a 13-game slate. So no niceties, no introductions. Let's get right to it. Where should we start?
F your feelings, Drew. Let's do this. We'll start with Jokic, and obviously he's suspended. Not gonna talk about. That's all over my timeline. But so he's out. So the big question is who starts and how these minutes get filled. So the big hint that I have on this is when Mike Malone said that he started Jeff Green for Porter Jr. because he had rebounding concerns. So now you're taking away your best rebounder. So I think they probably have. I think this takes PJ Dozier, who Malone says was his first loser to the starting lineup question in the last game. I think it kind of takes it off the table that they would go really small and put Gordon at the 4. I think they do want to go bigger, so I think Jeff Green's a pretty good bet to start. Now, you got such lack of depth at center that they might go like off totally Galaxy Brain. We've seen Malone go Galaxy Brain on Bol. I don't think that's going to happen. I think it's JaMychal Green. JaMychal Green's a pretty good rebounder in his own right, good post defender against these big Indiana guys. That was really one of JaMychal's strengths, especially back in the Doc days. So I feel pretty good to double Green starting lineup. And then we know Bones should have pretty secure minutes in that second unit. Austin Rivers, they like that 3-guard lineup when Facu got booted, and they ran Dozier, Rivers, and Bones together. And Malone said he liked that. So I would expect that unit to pick up a lot of run back there. And then obviously the other takeaway, like no Jokic, man. Just usage out the door. Monte Morris, everyone's gonna talk about Will Barton, but like Monte Morris had really good stats with Jokic off the floor last year. So he's a guy I'm probably gonna try to sneak in if I haven't seen his price yet, but I really like him today.
Yeah, we'll talk more about the DFS stuff, but just in terms on the premium show. But in terms of kind of thinking through the rotations right now, I think if they start with that big starting lineup, it's a good indication that Zeke Najee or Bol will have to play some minutes tonight. I think if they
really quick, I was going to add really quick. Malone did say he's expecting Zeke and Bol to get something tonight.
Yeah, we'll see. Malone has been a little bit more honest. Obviously, we saw Doc Rivers say he was going to play 10 guys, and he didn't play 10 guys last night. So I want to be thoughtful on how we interpret coach speak a little bit with what we've actually seen happen. And so I think if they start big, it's a good indication that Bol or Najee will play in the second unit because they are ceding front court minutes that they need to fill by basically moving Jeff Green to the 4, Aaron Gordon to the 3, Barton to the 2, and so on. I think if they start in a situation where they start someone like Dozier, Bones Highland, Rivers, then I think that's an indication that those minutes from Bol or Najee are very questionable. And when they play Bol, they like to play him as a zone-oriented center. And so that to me screams like backup center tonight would be Bol against some of the Indy second units that might not have as much shooting, right? With TJ McConnell leading the second units, assuming Brogdon's able to play, which is another question mark in that game. I don't think Bol or Zeke Najee are going to have any sort of DFS appeal. The real issue for them is whether they play or not, because if they do not play, you have to think about how a team replaces a player in terms of how they replace their size in kind of their position, and then how they replace their role. And in Jokic's case, the size, that can be replaced by JaMychal Green, Jeff Green, Bol to some extent. In terms of the role, the best guys to replace Jokic's role in terms of usage and running an offense and creating shots for people are going to be Will Barton, Aaron Gordon, because Aaron Gordon's done that a little bit in his time in Orlando when he played on weaker teams, Monte Morris. And then you get into like Bones Highland as like a guy who can create and initiate. And so I think there's chances that Bones sees a bigger minutes increase than you might expect from them losing a center, simply because they have to replace some of the playmaking. But for that to happen, I think you'd want to see a starting lineup that's smaller, because for him to open up more minutes, you kind of need Barton to be strictly a 3, not Barton playing some minutes at the 2. So that's how I describe kind of the Denver situation. I don't know that we'll have any sort of information. It's a 9:00 Eastern game on what their starting lineup is going to look like. So I think it's going to be one which a lot of stuff tonight, you're going to have to be around to potentially consider swaps. And we're going to be moving projections on starting lineups and different things. In terms of opposite that game with Brogdon, I think that's a situation that we can touch on as well. Brogdon's listed as questionable on the injury report. We've seen him be kind of a slow healer throughout. So, like, what do you think he's like for sure in? Like,
Well,
do you
he's
think
coming off an illness, so it's just a matter of like how ill he was. Maybe he was able to keep his conditioning up. So I don't think he goes. He was playing a sick amount of minutes. So I think he's not going to be like full where we're looking like 38, 39 minute upside, but I think he could go pretty close to mid. He went through practice. Really, no indication he's going to be limited here. So yeah,
Okay.
I'm more concerned about his role than
Okay.
obviously not having the high minutes. But he's leading the league in drives. He's leading in like so many point guard categories that I like. But we saw LeVert; he was like leading the league in usage rate in his first, I think, 2 games. So having him in there, Sabonis, they're going to want to get to now. He's going to have a big size advantage. So there's just a lot of ways that this usage gets split. We'll talk more about that later. But rotation wise, definitely expecting pretty good minutes from Brogdon.
Okay, cool. Then in terms of questionables to look at on this slate, let's start with Kevin Porter Jr. from the Rockets because he has a huge role, obviously, in the Rockets offense. What do you think the chances that he plays tonight? Let's start with that, and then we'll move to trying to figure out if he doesn't play, what the rotations look like.
Yeah, so not expecting him to play. He had a thigh bruise, didn't return, got rolled out, pretty quick. Didn't go. It was limited in practice yesterday off a bruise. So we've seen these bruises, right? Like look at Brandon Ingram, look at DeAndre Ayton. Like sometimes these bruises can take a while. So if he's not going through full practice, given the way that Silas has really talked about trying to play other players, if he can't go through a full practice, he's not going to be 100%. So I think that's why he sits. Going into the big conversation we had this morning was who starts, and you and I are 100% on the same page, and I'm pretty much can't be convinced otherwise that they're going to start Jalen Green and Eric Gordon. I think they want to keep DJ Augustine in the second unit. They don't have any other real ball handlers. I know Armani Brooks is maybe a point guard, but he's a shooter, not a ball handler.
Well, if they moved, I mean, they're going to split Augustine and Gordon. So one way or another, they're going to have one guy that can kind of ball handle in the second unit. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. So I'm in agreement with you, but I think they will have one guy regardless. If they started DJ, they'd still have Gordon in the second unit as an option.
Right. Yeah. I think that, and also they like the spacing from Gordon, and that's going to have to operate better with the way Wood's trying to score. Jalen Green's going to try to score. Tyson, I think the shooting is way more important than additional ball handling that DJ Augustine would provide. Because we know Green's going to start, but it's also worth noting that Daniel House is back. So that's another way that things could kind of get shaken up where, these David Nwabas who may have been sneaky, but now that with House back, went through practice, all indications he's going to be kind of a full go as the
he's not listed on the injury report.
Yeah.
His role has been questionable this year, so it's still like not, it's not the Daniel House of old when he'd play like 28 minutes. He's been playing like 15 when he's in. But getting back to the KPJ stuff, the way that I think this shakes out is I don't think DJ Augustine, even though he was the first replacement for Kevin Porter Jr. When Kevin Porter Jr. got hurt, I don't think he's the main guy that benefits. And the reason I don't think that's the case is twofold. One, I think they're generally going to want to create more minutes for younger players than they are for veterans. So in this instance, I think they'll view this as, hey, we've got 33, 34 Kevin Porter Jr. minutes to spread around. Who are the guys we want to get a look at? And I think one of them is going to be Armani Brooks, who they gave a big opportunity late in last season. Now, I don't think he's going to project anywhere for enough minutes to like make any sort of stink in DFS, but I just think in terms of playing with what the Rockets would do. So I think what they would do is, I agree with you, they'd slide Eric Gordon in the starting rotation. I also think they want to showcase Gordon like as much as they can, right? Like they're trying to trade him. So I think you give Jalen Green the opportunity to make mistakes as a point guard. Have Eric Gordon on there as like a secondary ball handler and floor spacer as well. You also have Jayshawn Tate in that first unit, who also has some experience like initiating offense. And so I think between Green, Gordon, and Tate, you can kind of get by with like out a true point guard. And then I think in the second unit, you have DJ as the true point guard, whereas the guys he's going to play with really need kind of a true point guard out there, because there's not going to be a lot of secondary initiation from guys like whether it's Daniel House or Kenyon Martin Jr. Or Şengün can kind of initiate, but he's questionable on the injury report too. So I think it makes too much sense to me for them to keep DJ where they might need more of the traditional point guard stuff, which is in the second unit than in the first unit. And then that second unit, that allows them also to basically keep DJ in his role, elevate Armani Brooks to like the backup 2 guard, and basically give Armani Brooks a shot at his 15 minutes tonight, instead of him playing like 1 to 8 or whatever. And I think that's kind of how it's going to work. And I don't think there's going to be like, it's a weird game because Houston's playing Detroit. So it's 2 bad teams. And usually when there's 2 bad teams going against each other, you get some DFS appeal. But I don't think it's going to be straight replacement value for Kevin Porter Jr. that opens up the DFS appeal. I think it's going to be some of the existing starters picking up more opportunities.
Yep, I totally agree. Just with Şengün, we'll probably see KPJ pick up most of the non-Wood Tice minutes. But it's worth noting that the last time that happened, when they were one big short.
Kenyon Martin Jr.
KJ Martin. My bad if I said the wrong guy.
Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, he'll pick up. But like, don't forget that, what was it, the Laker game, I think, when Gordon came back, they went super small to cut down minutes at the 4. So I still think if Şengün doesn't play, it'll be a pretty thin play for KJ Martin.
Yeah,
they still have more upside. There's also
they can still play Tice and Christian Wood and get all those center in a lot of 4 minutes too. So they still have ways to play there. All right, let's move down the list of questionables that we have, which is a pretty deep list today. Let's get to New York, where you've got Nerlens Noel, Mitch Robinson. We saw Taj Gibson play 19 second half minutes in a game that Noel left the game early. We had Mitch out that game. They're both questionable tonight. I'm actually like shocked that Nerlens Noel is questionable. I thought that was going to be like a really quick rule out. He's listed with a sprained right knee. He's not like historically a quick healer, and the injury looked bad when it first happened. So I'd be kind of shocked if he played at all. Mitch, I have less information on. Why don't you fill us in on Mitch?
Yeah, so just to put the bow on Nerlens, he was originally listed with soreness and then now listed with a sprain. We know this dude has a ton of knee issues. This is not the same knee he had in the preseason, but like you said, I'd be really surprised if he plays. Mitch is with a hip flexor. So hip flexors, that's muscle related. That's usually pretty bad, especially for a big dude. So, he got ruled out early, didn't have a game time tag. I don't think he's going to play. Just given his history, you don't want to put that dude out there early. So I think it makes sense that he sits. They're playing the Bucks. I think they can maybe, and we know they have that top end lineup that they go with. They really like to play that when they're trailing. So we didn't really see it in the Philly game when they were kind of keeping them at their distance. But that would be in the mix too. We saw some even smaller stuff in the last game where they went with kind of like a 4 guard lineup. RJ at the 4. Tibbs actually said he liked that too. So that's also on the table to open up Alec Burks, maybe Rose, and those dudes.
The thing I'll continue to remind about New York on all these shows, on the DFS shows as well, is they're just a much deeper team this year than they were last year. And that presents a lot of different ways they can innovate with lineup combinations to try stuff if they want to. So they are much better prepared to cover for the absence of starters than they were in the past. Now, Taj Gibson, like I said, played 19 second half minutes in that game without Noel. That's a huge workload. He averaged over 34 minutes per game last year in games that he started as well. So if we have both Mitch and Nerlens out, Taj is probably going to play quite a bit. What I will say is Taj is like really low upside from a DFS perspective. So we'll talk about what that means in terms of whether he's highly utilized by the field or not and how to approach things. But I would also say that the matchup with the Bucks specifically, when they're without Brook Lopez and they're going to be more willing to play smaller as well, can definitely facilitate some of these lineups with Julius Randle at the 5. Like a lot of minutes if they want to go that, if the Knicks want to go that route. So even if they were without Nerlens and Mitch, I could see scenarios tonight where Taj gets stuck in the 20s just because they need firepower offensively and they're choosing to play kind of Randle at the 5 or Toppin at the 5 and get into kind of their guard depth that they have that's so strong with Quickly, with Burks, these reserve guys who have had their minutes limited because of the depth of the team as a whole. So I do think while if Mitch and Noel were out, we would have to project Taj for a healthy workload. I do think this matchup creates some downside into what the stability of that workload is because of the Knicks guard and wing depth.
And just on the Bucks side of this, I should add too, Nerlens guarded Giannis in the game they just played, 6 days ago, whatever it was. We should note too, the Bucks are on a back-to-back. Drew Holiday recently returned from an injury. Giannis played a lot of minutes. Bobby Portis played a season high in minutes. He kind of just hit the full workload last night. coming off a hamstring strain. I believe he returned on the 27th of October and was steadily ramping up. So we know the Bucks like to rest guys. So I wouldn't be totally surprised if Portis gets the night off tonight in a revenge game.
I mean, the good news is they've already filed an injury report. So a lot of times,
okay,
yeah. So they've filed the injury report with just Chris, Brook, and Dante out. Nobody questionable. No, it's a clean injury report. A lot of times on teams on back-to-back, you won't get the report until much later in the day. So I would say that's the good news on the Bucks, who generally have been okay about this stuff when they're resting guys in advance, generally. All right, let's move over to New Orleans, which has been kind of a mess for a week and a half with this Brandon Ingram situation. He still has not come back to play. He's questionable again with this right hip contusion. It's actually a winnable game for them, right? They're playing Oklahoma City. I don't know if I think we're too early in the season to be in like thinking about tanking and different things like that. And I think the increased lotto ball odds have changed the emphasis on tanking. So I don't think that plays a role in New Orleans' decision-making tonight. I think it would just come down to whether they think BI is healthy enough. Herbert Jones has already said he's going to be a game-time decision as he comes back from left ankle soreness, also had the concussion issue a few games ago. How do you expect this to play out? I keep saying that generally the New Orleans guys are priced appropriately for life without Ingram. But when you play Oklahoma City, it's like a different scenario. So I think we actually need to be a little bit more cognizant of whether Ingram is a go tonight or not.
Yeah, so he was, 3 games ago he was game time, didn't go. 2 games ago was game time, didn't go. And then last time he wasn't even game time and got ruled out after he went through a full practice. So completely opposite. Shocked me with just the way timelines go. I mean, like you said, is this a standings thing that's keeping him out? The beats are getting asked. They don't have an answer. I don't have an answer. But yeah, based on progression, he should be playing tonight. But it's kind of hard. If you don't even go through warmups, you get ruled out.
Yeah.
So, you would think they're probably going to start Garrett Temple, probably throw him on Shea, which is a pretty good spot for Shea. And then Josh Hart got a big role last game. He'll be looking at a ton of minutes. This team's rested. They've been off for a couple of days. So they are just going to feed this man. Jonas Valanciunas is going to get like 80 shots, not 80, but a lot in a really good matchup against an undersized team. They started JRE in the last game. I do think there's a pretty good chance they start Derek Favors just because they kind of have to throw a bigger body at him. Like putting Robinson Earl on him is just cruel.
Yeah.
So, either way, JV is just huge spot today.
That'd be
if no BI.
That'd be dropping some meat in the big cat's cage for Jovel to eat if they throw JRE at him. But yeah, I think this is a situation that we actually have to pay a little bit more attention to today than in past New Orleans slates, just because the fact that they're going up against Oklahoma City does allow for upside. Some of the other matchups that they've had have been harder to generate upside at the price tags that these guys have had. So Joe Val, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Devontae Graham, Josh Hart, those guys, if Brandon Ingram and Herb Jones are both out, you get a lot of minutes to open up for those guys and obviously a lot of usage without Ingram. So it is one to definitely keep an eye on. Let's keep it moving to
just quickly cousin narrative. Shay and Nah.
Yeah.
If you're into that.
I don't know. I don't want to know any more about if people are into cousin narratives. Halliburton and Terrence Davis, both for the Kings, are both questionable. Let's move it there. This was an interesting one because last game we saw some really weird lineup iterations from Sacramento, even in the face of being without Halliburton. They basically responded by playing Davion Mitchell more, which was we expected, but Mitchell was in foul trouble much of the game, so they had to do some weird stuff. Then Terrence Davis got hurt mid-game, and still, like a guy like Mo Harkless, who you would think would kind of benefit from these situations as like a wing player, played 12 minutes.
Yeah.
So in turn, like we saw Chimi Metu play more. They had a closing lineup that kind of made it a game with Phoenix, and so they kind of stuck with that really long. It was just a weird game in terms of how they approach things. But obviously, if Halliburton and Terrence Davis are both out, we saw Buddy Hield slide into the starting lineup last time. I think Hield has a ceiling of like 38, 39 minutes with the way Luke Walton does things over there. And I think he has a floor of like 28 to 30. So the range is pretty wide, but he'd probably be a little bit underpriced for that role. In terms of Terrence and Hallie, what do you think the odds are that we see them play tonight? Do you think these are true questionable tags? Do you have leans on either one of them?
Yeah, just really quick. Bams didn't go through shoot around. Talk about that in a second. But so Luke Walton said that Halliburton had a tight back and he wasn't going to play until his back loosened up. So that made me seem like he had really no shot to play in the last game. And I mean, backs are tricky, right? Like some days you wake
Yeah.
up, your back feels great. Sometimes it takes 2 months or whatever, you know. So I just think it makes sense, you know, if he couldn't even come close to playing just 2 days later, you'd think he wouldn't play. And yeah, to your point, like they had that really funky Damian Jones stuff late because they made a run. So throw that out the window. Like Rashawn Holmes is in a really good matchup. But Terrence Davis, I don't think it looked too bad. It's kind of hard to project him out just because I don't really have enough information. So we'll see what happens with him. But yeah, Buddy Hield's going to play a bunch. You mentioned the Davion foul trip. You pretty much did everything.
Just in terms of that rotation, like if they were without both Halliburton and Terrence Davis, in terms of the guards that they have De'Aaron Fox, Buddy Hield, Davion Mitchell, and then Jamias Ramsey, who got a few token minutes towards the end of the last game. I think just because of the lack of depth there, Ramsey would have to be projected in that scenario into the rotation as like the fourth guard. But the thing is, typically they've been playing these 3-guard lineups, so it's not just covering 2 spots, it's covering 3. It's covering the small forward spot as well. And so that's why I was so confused by Harkless only playing 12 minutes last game when after Terrence Davis got hurt, when Davion Mitchell was in foul trouble, they got away from it and they played Chemi Metu and slid Barnes to the 3. And so I think this is an interesting thing where like Harkless or Metu could benefit if both of these guys are out. I don't think either would be DFS oriented guys, but Harkless in particular, like he's a guy that if you're playing Kings, you kind of want him to play a lot of minutes because he doesn't really take up any possessions. And so it goes to all the other guys. And Metu can be that way a little bit, but he's a little bit more aggressive than Harkless. So just in terms of if both Sacramento guys are out tonight, I think you get really heavy minute ceilings on Fox, Hield, and Mitchell. And I think Barnes actually could lose a little bit of value simply because I think it's possible that he slides down in position, down to the small forward spot, which would impact his rebounding numbers a little bit.
Yeah, and good matchup for him too. The Spurs allow a lot of drives for Fox. For Fox, that is. Fox coming off 24 drives. Read matchups. It's all in there.
All right. Keeping it moving over to Miami, which you just mentioned that Bam did not go through shoot around today. Bam, Tyler Hero, PJ Tucker, and Strus is still on the injury report, even though we're expecting him back as well.
He actually just got downgraded to questionable. So that came just somewhat recently.
So we have a ton of question marks here. We know Markieff Morris is out with a neck injury. We know, Oladipo's not close to returning. So this is a Miami team that we've talked about in the past. We think they're really, really good, but we don't think they're super deep. And so if they lost Bam and Markieff and Tyler Hero in terms of 3 rotation players and Strus, 4 rotation players potentially, things are going to get weird, right? So I think in those scenarios, you would see Kyle Lowry play a ton. I think you'd see Jimmy Butler play a ton. I think you'd see Dwayne Dedmon play as much as he can, as soon as he gets to the 5th foul, basically. Which could be in 10 minutes. It could be in 24 minutes. I think you would see like if PJ Tucker couldn't go as well, I mean, like there's just infinite different weird lineup combinations that you could get here. So what do you think? What do you think on these guys with the Heat? And then like what iterations do you want to walk through? Because we're talking about like 5, rotation players here.
Yeah, so I think now that we have this information on Bam, and they're on a back-to-back, they get the LA back-to-back too. So, yeah, you'd think, and Spoelstra has said kind of in spots that he's caring about the long-term on minutes. So, I mean, no Bam shoot-around. We probably got to project him out. So, yeah, Dedmon and his foul rate, certainly. I think they kind of have to put Omer at 7 in the mix just because they're losing Markieff, and they really played that there.
Yeah.
So that's in play. PJ Tucker said is also questionable. They played Caleb Martin at the 4. Caleb Martin also probable. He should be good. He'd be looking at more minutes. They do like him down there in that 4 spot, so he would be playing a little bit more. Obviously, we even saw Gabe Vincent get like a spot minute just before garbage time in the last game too. So he would probably carve some minutes out.
Well, let's start from here. Let's say they're without everybody somehow.
Oh my God, yeah.
If they are without everybody, I think it's Kyle Lowry is the lead point guard. Gabe Vincent's the backup point guard.
Yep.
Duncan Robinson is the starting shooting guard. They don't really have a backup shooting guard in that spot. I think it would be KZ Okpala. But he would also have to be the backup 3 to Jimmy Butler.
And they would run some Lowry, Vincent
And I
overlap,
think they might even be forced in that scenario to start, like, I don't know, could they play Dedmon at the 4 and your 7 at the 5? Like, they wouldn't have bodies. Like, I like, we're running out of numbers, right?
Yeah.
Like, because if they had, they'd have Lowry, Vincent, Duncan.
Well,
Caleb,
guess what? Spoelstra
Butler.
just says he says it looks like Hero and Bam will be available tonight.
Okay. Because otherwise, I was getting like an 8-man rotation with only 8 guys.
Maybe
available.
like a 4-man.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Drew, it's going to be a Doc Rivers 10-man rotation is what it was looking like.
Exactly. All right. So if Bam and Hero are in and expected to play, then the question marks are on PJ Tucker. And I do think one thing I will note here, I think there's a scenario that Dedmon starts if Tucker's out and Bam plays at the 4.
Mm-hmm.
Because
that's possible.
Because usually Markieff plays the 5. I think they'd match Dedmon with the DeAndre start basically and have Bam go up against AD. Because how else do you respond?
Yeah.
So I think there's a chance that Dedmon is still viable from a DFS perspective if Bam plays and if PJ Tucker is out. Because I think the Markieff Morris injury is a big deal to their rotation front court. They just don't have a lot of depth there.
Yep.
You know that. Okay. I do think also like Hero being able to play is a big deal because otherwise I was going to be pounding Kyle Lowry tonight like a ton if Hero was even like questionable on limited side of things. But we'll move on from that. We'll keep that for the DFS show. In terms of other questionables, I do want to take some of these like little questionables because I think they're important. Mm-hmm. Dylan Brooks and Zaire Williams. Brooks, we think, is going to return tonight. Jaren Jackson made a big deal about like shout out to Canada. Dylan Brooks is coming back soon. Whatever Brooks's number is, he kept referring to his number. I forget what the number is. We've got Brooks projected in, Williams projected out. I kind of think the only way it really matters is if both are out. I think if one is in and one is out, that like they kind of play similar roles. But what I will say on Dylan Brooks is depending on how quickly they bring him along could have an impact on Melton and Bane. Mm-hmm. And Dylan Brooks is like he's a big piece of the personality of that team. We might not think he deserves that with his play, but he is that. And so I think there's a chance that they immediately start him and play him like 25, 28 minutes. And that's different than what Zaire Williams has been doing. And as a result, that would really impact the ceilings for both Bane and Melton tonight. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's kind of an important thing when we see a Memphis starting lineup. I think if they are not starting Dylan Brooks, that is a very strong signal that they're bringing him along slowly. Mm-hmm. Like I think if they think he can play 25, they're starting him because I think it's like an ego thing that he's like he's the starter and he's the guy who like I think that's his role. Do you disagree? Do you think he's coming back tonight?
Well, I think he's coming back. So back on, I want to say the 2nd of this month, they talked about this quote transition period, sent him down to G League, got I believe 2 full kind of sessions in with them. So this is over. That's on top of what I don't know. So I think he's got a good chance to play. It makes sense to get him out there. And I think it's like they're taking the long view. So to your point, like, yeah, Dylan Brooks, man, I mean, this guy takes more shots than anybody really should in the league. But I think he kind of understands that, you know, he's coming off injury. I think it's an easier pill to swallow for him coming off the bench, given the way that this is. Don't forget, I mean, when this
it's
all
also
started,
an easier way to get him shots. Like it's also an easier way to find his rhythm. Like I think that it's most likely he's coming off the bench, but I want like to be clear. If he comes off the bench, I think it's like he's playing like 15 to 20 minutes tonight. If he starts, I don't know. Like I think the range if he starts is like 20 to 30. So, and that has a big impact on Melton and Bane specifically.
Yeah, and just to add to this, we found this news out because Dylan Brooks was sitting courtside at Summer League, and I and other people who were like, what the hell? He's got a cast on his hand. You know, so this has been going on since Summer League. But before that, too, because he had the surgery by then. Yeah. So this is a long process. I think it's going to kind of have a little bit of a ramp up here, especially when the guys are playing. So,
and this is a really good matchup for the Memphis guards for 3-point shooting, right? Like Charlotte plays really fast. They give up a lot of threes. So I do think it's important. And I think it's one to definitely keep an eye on. But I think the starting lineup will give us a hint and an indication at what Dylan Brooks' role is. If both Brooks and Zaire Williams are active, I think it just takes away from like John Concar. I think they'll like Zaire Williams will go to playing like Concar's like 8 to 12 minutes a night or whatever. Like I think that's kind of how that will mix.
And also, it's just want to add too that Taylor Jenkins had mentioned like they had been doing some research on playing Jaren Jackson more at the 5, and he really liked it. Like he was almost like saying like, "Yeah, we found this works now." So we saw Steven Adams' minutes kind of tick down. So that's another way to free minutes up is to run him more at the 5. So I think Adams is indirectly affected here too.
Yeah, I think Adams' ceiling, we saw early in the season him get up to like 30 minutes some nights. I don't think we'll see a lot of that going forward. I think they also, like Brandon Clark played really well last game. I feel like they need to figure out some things on the back end of that front court rotation that playing 30 minutes a night for Steven Adams doesn't help you figure out. So I do think his ceiling is going to be limited going forward. It was already kind of a questionable ceiling on the whole. The other questionable tag that we want to talk about is Isaac Okoro. Obviously, Cleveland, they lost Colin Sexton for a long time, and they're getting Okoro back kind of just at the right time. And you saw Okoro in a starter's jersey with shoot around, so we're expecting him to be able to start tonight. The question for us is whether he's starting over Dean Wade or whether he's starting over Colin Sexton, which would be otherwise the spot you'd expect Ricky Rubio to start. And so why don't you talk through kind of what the iterations of lineup combinations for the Cavs could look like tonight against Washington, a team that generally plays a little bit on the smaller side.
Yeah, and also fantastic perimeter defense from them too. But so like to me, right, like you've had a couple of days off, your main offensive player just went down. You've been starting Dean Wade because you have to, right? So now Dylan Windler's playing better. He's healthy now. Obviously, you have Okoro coming back. You're kind of just have to start from scratch, I feel like. So I think Dean Wade, could lose a lot of minutes. Maybe he goes back to being that backup 5/4 man that we're seeing there. Maybe they want to play Windler to get shooting out there. There's just a lot of ways they could spin it. But Windler did go through practice. He's going to have some kind of cap on him. It's whether it's a 25 or a 32 or something like that.
Windler or Okoro?
Sorry, Okoro. If I say Windler. Anyways, Okoro, because he's missed time with this hamstring strain. Definitely something they don't throw you out 40 minutes right away for. So he won't get the crazy minutes, but and it's also worth noting Bickerstaff said they see him as a 2, but he also kind of like tied in that I was like they see him in a 2 like eventually, So I think that I kind of read that as like maybe they got to start him at the 3 this time. We saw Rubio play a ton of minutes in the old. I always say the the Dame CJ McCollum rotation where they basically fill in the point guard minutes together. They would obviously have to fill other guys in there too. So of course you're not going to play him like his usage rate is.
But it's important to think through things. You said something that had me a little bit concerned because we did raise Okoro's minutes from 28 to 30 this morning.
Yeah.
You said you think he can't go higher than 32. Then if that's the case, then we need to come back down.
Yeah, I think you're. I think he can get to 32 though. I just don't think he's gonna. I don't think he's gonna have like a full go of it. We'll probably get the money.
So I think a full go for Okoro would be a ceiling of like 36. I think. Okay. I think the range would be like 28 to 36. I think a fully limited, the range would probably be like 24 to 30, in which case we'd need to be at like 27, 28 on the minutes. And then I think somewhere in between would be like 26 to 34, which if the low end is 24 or something like that, then we need to come down from 30.
Yeah.
Because I don't think he's hitting 36. So you think the low end is closer to 24, 25?
Yeah.
Okay.
Low
so
end,
then we'll need.
I think he could definitely he could get the Siakam, 4-6 treatments.
Okay, so then we need to come back down on him. We need to come back down on him a little bit. In terms of the rotations for Cleveland, the reason I say that it could be for Sexton or it could be for Wade in terms of Okoro's spot is because sometimes when teams have really, really limited guard depth, even though we think they will close with Rubio and Garland, they might not start that way because they might decide that like, hey, we really want to stagger these guys like heavily. And as a result, we just want to start with them staggered, and then we'll figure it out as the game goes on. Because I think if they start them together, they obviously could do that Dame CJ rotation. But the difference is with Dame and CJ is that they have Anthony Simons as a combo guard that can fill those minutes. You look at the Cleveland depth charts there, that does not exist for them. So if they start Garland and Rubio together, I think you might have to see some increased minutes for Windler, or Kevin Pangos plays a little bit, or Denzel Valentine plays a little bit. If they separate them from a starting perspective, then I think those guys' minutes are more in question, because I think it's clear that they can figure out a way to get. I don't think like Rubio's total minutes allocation is going to be impacted much, whether he starts or if he's off the bench. I think the range is going to be somewhat similar, but I think the secondary guys get impacted, where if he starts, I think you see some of the minutes for Osman and Wade become a little bit shakier. And if he doesn't start, then I think those minutes become a little bit more secure in the minutes for like Windler, and like if Pangos was able to play or anything, those minutes get more questionable.
Yep, sounds about right. It's just
okay.
a matter if they go big or small.
Okay. In terms of other issues to look at tonight, the Lakers we actually should talk about as well. Like, we're used to talking about the Lakers with all the big guys on the injury report. LeBron is still out, so there's nothing to monitor there. Kendrick Nunn is still out. Anthony Davis is on the injury report as probable, but that's not the thing we're talking about tonight. It's Austin Reeves and Rajon Rondo are both questionable. And we've seen the Lakers just don't have a lot of depth as is. So if they were to miss these two guys, you could see scenarios where like all of a sudden like Malik Monk and Avery Bradley and Wayne Ellington and Kent Bazemore, their minutes become more stable, where we've seen like wild fluctuation in these guys the last few weeks. If you take out Reeves and Rondo, then those guys naturally their minutes get more stable. From a DFS perspective, I don't think it moves the needle very much at all, especially against Miami. But just in terms of like, if you're thinking about on the prop side, we've been taking a ton of Bazemore unders for a while now. There is a little bit more risk associated with, if both Rondo and Reeves are out, his minutes get a little bit more secure, and we don't see the downside that we just saw last game.
Yeah, Rondo was kind of a big deal. I believe he had a 2019 left hamstring strain, a 2015 hamstring strain on the same hamstring, and then one more before. So we're talking about an older guy with a history of hamstring strains. I don't really know what the extent of this injury is, because I didn't really see anything. We saw him get ejected in the last game. So, like, maybe it's minor, but just given the context of the injury and the age, I think he kind of sits, which, to your point, like, they've run – Vogel is big on having a ball handler and an organizer of the offense, and it was usually Westbrook and LeBron. You're missing LeBron. Now you're going to miss Rondo, who was filling in those non-Westbrook ball handling minutes. Now you're – what the hell? You got nobody. Avery Bradley was kind of a point guard coming up. I could see him handling some ball handling stuff. It's just Russ is going to have to play a ton if Rondo can't play, and it's a terrible matchup for him with the way Miami defends too. So, yeah, I could see Westbrook getting a ridiculous amount of minutes if both those guys don't play. And I don't know anything about Austin Reeves. I have no history on the guy injury wise, so kind of just have to go in. Hopefully, it's minor, but it's a new injury for him.
Okay, some other smaller, like, kind of rotation notes that I just want to touch on before we get out of here. One, Phoenix, Landry Shamet is doubtful, and he had been playing kind of a small bench rotation role. They had been going with 10-man rotations. They could condense it just to 9. They also have Chandler Hutchinson as a possibility that they could like kind of throw into the mix as another option. I think with Cam Payne back, they're more likely to just play 9 than they are to play 10. But it does give a little bit more upside to the ceiling of minutes like Devin Booker, Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson, Jay Crowder, so on and so forth, just removing the like 14 to 16 minutes from Shamet on any given night.
Yeah, I think Cam Payne the most likely. Then I think Cam Johnson will make a lot more sense. We've seen them run that triple wing lineup of Cam, Mikal, and Crowder together, so that's certainly on the table. Yeah, like you said, they could just fill those minutes that way, even though Shemet's been pretty good for them. So, and still no DeAndre Ayton, JaVale McGee. Right. I like JaVale McGee every night, apparently. Yeah. But definitely be in him. Again, in a pretty good matchup, too, I think.
And then the last one I wanted to touch on was Keita Bates-Diop for San Antonio has been listed as out. And they also made Josh Primo and Joe Wieskamp, their draft picks, available tonight from G League assignment. We just gave Bates-Diop's minutes to Primo. Like, I think we probably see Primo play a little bit, but
really?
I think so. Like, who else? Like, you think they just condense the rotation? I mean, it's only 8 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, maybe more Bryn Forbes, a little bit more Vassell. I mean,
They
I
could
think got everybody
definitely
covered.
they could definitely just condense the rotation. But I also feel like if you're calling the guy up, like why?
I mean, they call him up all the time. It's just
Okay.
kind of like transactionally.
Okay. So
Yeah.
the thing that I was going to say here with Bates Diop, his absence is just it increases the ceiling on the minutes for Keldon Johnson. If
Hmm.
Keldon Johnson can avoid foul trouble, we've seen games for Keldon get up to 37, 38 in the best case scenarios. We've also seen them go down to 22, 23 in the worst case scenarios. So the ranges of outcomes are really, really wide on Keldon, but I think this is a pretty good matchup for Keldon in terms of a Sacramento team that doesn't have a lot of size and width in the paint that can really kind of annoy him and get him off his game. So if we had 8 minutes for Bates Diop, I think the other solution to like not just giving them to another person in the rotation would be giving Forbes a few more, Vassell, a minute or two, maybe Keldon another minute, maybe Thad another minute, those types of things. They're also without Jock Landell as a third center, so they only have two centers with Eubanks and Thad. So those guys should be pretty clear to play all 48 at the center position and not have any of these small ball lineups as well. Could give them minutes to McDermott, those types of guys. It sounds like you prefer to go that route than project another guy in the rotation.
Yes, I'd be pretty surprised. Just to be clear on, Primo hasn't been recalled, but like the Nets recall their G League guys almost every day. Teams just kind of call them up all the time just for how they want to give them their work.
Right.
Maybe they don't have. Maybe they don't have a lot of G League
San Antonio
game
is just a more developmentally oriented team, so they usually I feel like they usually just have guys kind of with the G League team throughout the year, and they don't move them back and forth as much. But they are shorthanded. No Pirtle, no Zach Collins, no Landell, no Bates Diop, no Kickock. That's like all front court players that are like back into the rotation guys. Yeah. They don't have that here. So, again, I think, and it's if we give the minutes we spread them out to other guys in the rotation already, then you could see these guys pop a little bit more in projections because it would condense things to like closer to a 9-man rotation. Yeah. And if they play there's pretty big upside.
I mean, I think they still have like pretty straight 10, right? If they go DeJounte, Trey Jones was getting some minutes, Derek White, and then have Bryn Forbes back him up, Keldon, and then with Lonnie behind him, and then McDermott with Vassell behind him, and then they're too big. So that's 10 right there.
Okay. Yeah. So that's what we'll do. So we'll spread those minutes to like Trey Jones and Bryn Forbes and those types of guys. But I do think the ceiling for guys like Thad Young and Keldon Johnson improves.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Yeah, because we've seen Keita Bates Diop kind of cut in him against I forget. It's all about who they're playing against Sacramento. So you don't need extra size against Harry B and Mo Harkless. So this is a real. I can't rate everyone up, but yeah, I think this is a really good spot for Keldon today.
Okay, cool. So I think that covers it for the injuries that I wanted to get through on this giant 13-game slate. Is there anybody that I missed, Mike, that you wanted to talk about tonight?
Yes.
Who?
No, sorry, I was trying to do something funny. No, he's not. Al Horford. No, I got the Al Horford hoodie on. By the way, so I just
Al Horford is not on the injury report.
He's not, but I just wanted to. That makes me laugh every time. So there's Mr. Coro.
We'll end it on that. We will be back for the DFS show at 5:00 Eastern behind the paywall over at Established Run. If you're not subscribed, I don't know what you're doing, but thank you for taking a peek at our free content here on the injury report analysis. You can pay it back to me by subscribing to our YouTube channel here and getting us those sweet Google advertising dollars.
Thumbs up, cool too.
Give us the thumbs up and whatnot. And if you are behind the paywall with us, we'll see you at 5:00 Eastern to talk through this massive 13-game DFS slate and get you ready. We will be back again tomorrow at 2:00 for myself and Mike. Best of luck in all your games tonight. See you tomorrow.